great way to start our meeting. And I know we'll hear more about that in a little bit, but just love it. So thank you. I will acknowledge that commissioners are meeting on Microsoft Teams this morning, and I'd like a motion and a second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Luther, who is out of town.
So moved. Second.
Pam, can you call the roll?
Yes, Commissioners Adams, Koba,
Aye.
Devon,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lamb, Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. The motion carries. Can I get a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of September 10th, 2025? Pam, can you call the roll?
Oh, we need a motion and a second.
So moved.
We do, don't we?
Second.
Commissioners Adams, Koba,
Aye.
Devon,
Aye. Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lamb, Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Curtis, good morning. Executive Director's Report.
Good morning, Madam President and Commissioners. Nice to see everyone, albeit remotely. I really appreciate that we're able to do this meeting remotely. I know we had a fair amount of travel and just love the chance to do this electronically. Some of the lessons we learned from the pandemic. I'll also second the point made earlier by Commission President Koba. Hispanic Heritage Month this month. We're just really thrilled to celebrate here inside the port, the rich, diverse community of our employee base, but also the community we're in. And again, just fun to have a start and a reminder to the day. Really happy to celebrate this month. Next, if I could, I'd like to highlight the monthly safety champions here on the screen. You'll see again from around the port, Mike and Lisa, Ryan and Jared, just a bunch of folks really watching out for each other. I'll highlight Captain Spina here for a minute. Mike, in his daily work out with the fire department, was visiting a building out next to the airfield and said he saw something that just didn't look right. And I just note, so often we see those things where you just think, that's not quite right. I'm going to look into that, and being able to say, hey, someone go have a look at that. Just ways that employees every day can help us all be safer. So appreciate all of them on safety and keeping safety in the forefront. And now, speaking of fire department, if I could, I've got fire inspectors and training assistants with us. It's Ryan Roy and Megan Mulligan Gallup are going to join us for the safety message. Commissioners, you'll remember a couple months ago, I mentioned Ryan Roy, who does a number of our CPR trainings. He was the one responsible for the training that ended up in one of our employees saving someone's life on his way to work. So just really appreciate our firefighters and Ryan and Megan being with us here today. So if you two are ready to go, let's have our safety message.
Sweet. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Ryan Roy, and I'm one of the fire inspectors here at the airport. And I'm going to talk to you really quickly about the CPR program that we host and provide to our employees. Like Mr. Rommel said, we did have an incident just recently where we instructed some folks over at the navigation division. One of the employees was off shift, encountered an incident that required his attention, and he used his skills and his trainings to the best of his ability and had to save. And so that's a great testament to what we try and do at the airport and at the fire department. Just really quickly talking about CPR that we provide. We teach a number of different divisions throughout the airport: police, fire, the dredge, navigation, maintenance. Everybody that wants it can come and get it from us. We've taught just this year alone over 200 people basic CPR and AED skills, which is highly rewarding because all those folks interact with our customers here at the airport. And then just noteworthy, we just recently made the switch where we're going and using the American Red Cross content for our training materials. And so it's a little bit of a refresher for us and a little bit of change. It's still the same material, just a different way to present it. And so if you haven't had a class in a while, we've got some new material to share and would love to have you come out. I coordinate with Megan. She runs the AED program, which is also crucial to our CPR AED programs. And she's going to talk to you about some AED stuff.
Yes, thank you everyone for having us. Again, I'm Megan Mulligan Gallup. I am another one of your fire inspectors here at the airport. Our AED program is something that I've taken a lot of pride in since I took over it just about a year ago now. We have over 60 AEDs at the airport, and with the expansion still growing in our north and south nodes, we still hope to add more once that's completed. We cover the terminal, concourses, headquarters, the parking structures, and many other very helpful facilities at the airport where people might need to be able to use an AED. With the help of Port IT, we have been able to do Wi-Fi upgrades on our AEDs. What that does is allow me to communicate with a system called LifeNet. And LifeNet gives me up-to-date information on our battery life, on the electrode pads that will be placed on a patient. It also gives me notifications on if the battery life is draining on those, when I need to replace it. It also gives me notifications so that I can have really good communication with the crews on, are those pads being placed on a patient? Were they used on someone? So that way I'm able to double back after that call and say, hey, do we need to replace these pads? They can tell me that stuff has been taken out of service and a new AED has been put in the cabinet in the meantime. They're able to download that data and we're able to have good communication with each other. Currently, I still do walk all these cabinets every month. So you will see me out and about across the port, checking the cabinets, making sure that they have a little indicator light that blinks that I check and I say, okay, it's lining up. The pads are good. The battery's good. We're still safe in this cabinet. I often work with dispatch too, just to open cabinets every once in a while and make sure that they are alarming and sounding to them. We don't get a audible alarm, kind of to keep the panic down a little bit in those cardiac events, but it does go directly to our dispatch. So anywhere emergency is happening, they're able to communicate that to our crews when they are dispatched on a call. Also, like Ryan said, running this PDX Lifesavers program, I'm a little small, so you can't see me as well, but this is one of our training AEDs. And basically these look exactly the same as what is inside of our cabinets around the port, which is excellent. I think it empowers people to be trained on the same type of equipment that they are going to pull out of any of our AED cabinets. And that way, any hesitation to act is probably going to be minimized because I go, hey, I've trained on this. I feel comfortable. Megan and Ryan taught me well. And now I know how to use this on someone that really needs it. And so I think that's a really big win for us. We've had about 6 cardiac events this year, and we've had really great survival rates because we are so close, the fire station into the airport. Our response time is so much shorter than if you were out in some kind of a rural community. And so we are really lucky to be able to run this PDX Lifesavers program, to be able to monitor not only from our computers, but boots on the ground, these AEDs, and really give people a shot after a cardiac event to go on to live a very healthy life. Thank you.
Perfect. Megan and Ryan, thank you both just so much for the work you do. And Megan, you're right. There is some luck, but also it's the old Jack Nicklaus thing about you make your own luck, right? The more I practice, the luckier I get. So just we really appreciate you. I know just on behalf of the commission and the whole port team, appreciate you and our entire fire department for the work you all do. And honestly, the life-saving record that you all have is pretty incredible. So thanks for making the time today and for that presentation. Commissioners, a few bits of update for you. as everyone knows, government shutdown is going on. We've talked about it and we've been getting ready for it. We haven't really seen major travel impacts at PDX. I know in some airports around the country, we're beginning to see some folks calling in sick around FAA in particular. The employees that we're talking about that are affected here are FAA and air traffic controllers, TSA and U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents, and they're all designated as essential workers. So essentially, they have to continue to work through the shutdown. They just won't be paid until after the shutdown. Honestly, it's a terrible position to put our federal partners in. It's bad for the employees. It's bad for our operation, but this is our current state of affairs, and it is not the first time we've had a shutdown. So we know how to deal with it. We're thinking a lot about how the community and the airport community that's really honestly like a family can help support these federal workers. We've had some help from concessionaires and our own team to really get at some of those things. Mostly we learned in that 35-day shutdown in 2019. You'll remember we were able to provide some support to employees at the airport site. It's worth noting on the Marine side, Coast Guard and Army Corps employees are also considered essential. So it's touching many parts of the port. We expect our own operations to continue with minimal impact on marine shipping and dredging, but inside the airport, I would say the longer these things go on, the more passengers should expect delays and prepare for those delays. It's just simply that folks aren't getting paid, and at some stage they have to think about how they make ends meet and pay their own rent. So it's just, honestly, it's an unfortunate situation to be in. We'll keep monitoring and working with those partners, and we'll keep you posted. Also in the news, federal deployment of troops, which I certainly feel is unnecessary here in Portland and in Oregon, and have made my own voice and the port's view on this very clear. At the same time, we have received hundreds of complaints about increased helicopter and airplane flights over southwest Portland, southeast Portland. That activity appears to be related to federal law enforcement and military activity. It is not a development the port has any control over, but we have passed those concerns and complaints on to our federal partners to let them know that the community is experiencing that impact. A few bits of fun and good news. You heard a year ago, we got a great recognition from Fast Company. We just got a second one from Fast Company, the 2025 Innovation by Design Award. I'm going to read a little bit about the award. The editorial staff asked, what problem does the design solve? Does the design make sense? Is it thoughtfully designed, and does it make a difference in its users' lives? So PDX was recognized as a Innovation by Design Award winner, called out for being serene with the sensibility of a forest, serving as a point of local pride, accommodating growth, factoring in new seismic considerations, and hitting sustainability goals. So again, hats off to the entire PDX Next team. Again, 30,000 people who have had a part in making this great addition to our community happen. And then finally, as I think commissioners, you all know, annually, we really like to celebrate employee appreciation out at PDX with our PDX People event. We did our annual event a week ago. They're a ton of fun. I went out to a couple of them. We do swag and some food and fun. And it's just a thank you to all the airport workers who make travelers' experience both a little brighter and a little safer. And we asked folks to share with us a little bit about what makes PDX so special. And so if we can, I'd like to share a video with you to close out my remarks this morning. If I can get our AV colleagues to help me on this with the video.
You know what I really like about working at PDX? It's like a family.
A lot of people are like family, and it's good people to work with.
You know, my coworkers come from all lineages and all heritages, so I learn a lot from everyone, really.
I love the people, I love the food, I love the culture, I love it all. It doesn't even feel like work to me most of the time.
I love just kind of the community of it. We're all working, rowing in the same direction. give people the best experience when they're either on their way or coming back from something. You don't know what's happened in someone's life, but we're here to do what we can to make sure they have a good experience here.
I think it's just such a fun experience being around all the aviation, but I don't know, it's my first time working at an airport, so I love it.
I love meeting new people every day. Everyone's happy because they're coming or going somewhere fun.
I love the atmosphere. All kinds of people, different cultures, different backgrounds, a great melting pot of all kinds of fun people to be around.
I love everything about our customer service.
It's the people. It's the people like yourself. That's what makes PDX great.
Well, it was a ton of fun. This video tells a little bit of the story, but as I think commissioners, you all know, the people who make PDX tick are just incredible. And it is just a fun thing to celebrate, but also to recognize how much better we are for the rich span and diversity that we have on site. So just really happy to have that celebration this week. And with that, Madam President, conclude my remarks.
Excellent. What a wonderful video. Thank you for sharing, for sure. Any questions for Curtis or any comments that commissioners would like to make? And since I can't see all of you, you can always just speak up. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So can I get a motion and a second for approval of the executive director's report?
So moved.
Second.
Pam, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioners Adams,
Aye.
Koba,
Aye.
Devon,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Moving on to public comment, we have one individual who has indicated they'd like to give public comment. And as a reminder to everyone, the port appreciates this opportunity for the public to make comment to the port and to share their opinions. So we thank you for coming today. But we do also ask that you keep your comments brief. We love comments submitted in writing as well. And so I will provide a gentle reminder once we get to 2 minutes that it's time to wrap up your comments. And our commenter this morning, Elena Burgazova. Elena, are you on?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you and good morning.
Okay. Hello, good morning. So my name is Elena Burgazova, and I live in Southwest Portland. I would like to comment about aircraft noise issue in our area in Southwest Portland. We first reported it to the Port Noise Management about 4 years ago. The port stated that there is no change, but we now know that there is a change caused by implementing next-gen concentrated flight path and PBN procedures. The result of this change is that communities far from the airport are now affected by the noise versus to quiet skies before. So there is a change where real people, we really feel the change. There is a nationwide, this is a nationwide issue. There was a Department of Transportation and Infrastructure meeting held in March 2022, where this problem was mentioned by representatives of Oregon and other states. Airports in other states are working with the public on remediating this. We need Port of Portland to do the same. Work with us instead of rejecting and ignoring. We have been sending a lot of emails and submitting all other possible ways reporting this issue. We just keep doing this because this is destroying our lives, and we need to address that. And we need the port to cooperate and work with us for resolution. That's it from me. I tried to keep it short. I have much more to say, though.
Thank you very much for your comments. As I said, we appreciate that. Okay, we have no other public comment this morning. We'll move on to our general discussion agenda item. And Curtis, if you would introduce our morning's guest.
You bet. Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, As you all know, the port is really uniquely situated in this lovely and I should say peaceful part of the world to help create family wage jobs and enhance shared prosperity in our communities. We really like to bring thought leaders and economists to talk to you on a regular basis to sort of hear what they're seeing, what trends might be relevant to our work at the port, and really to help inform your decisions as leaders. And so it's really a pleasure for me today to introduce our speaker, John Taponia, who's one of Oregon's most respected voices on economic and on public policy issues. John's a senior policy advisor at Eco Northwest, where he previously was president for, I don't know, John, 12 years maybe, a good long while.
Right. Yeah.
Over his career, he's advised national foundations and state agencies and local governments on issues ranging from education to housing and workforce policy. He began his career at the U.S. Congressional Budget Office and interestingly also served in the Peace Corps in Chile. He's also, hats off to you, John, the chair of the Oregon Public Broadcasting Board of Directors, which, you know, I adore. Many of you have heard from John before, including in front of the Port Commission. He just brings this great mix of analytical rigor and a deep understanding of Oregon's history and economic and demographic trends. And his most recent work really challenges us as Oregonians to confront a new era where population growth is no longer a given and where the systems we built in the 70s and 80s might not fit the future. And that is a conversation, as you all know, we've been having here at the port. And so we thought this was a great time to have John come and share his most recent work. And so with that, John, take it away. Great to have you here with us.
Well, thanks for having me. And before I get into this deck, I do want to compliment all of you on running a highly performing public agency. It's a point of pride for this community and serves as a brand statement for the region. You've just done a phenomenal job, and every time I see new material put out, including the video you just showed, you seem to knock it out of the park. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And thanks for having me here this morning. So this is work in anticipation of the December 8th Leadership Summit. That's an annual gathering that was originally inspired by Senator Ron Wyden. We're going to have it at the Oregon Convention Center, and we wanted to put some material together to get the community on the same page around sort of the economic outlook. So this is called Oregon's Choice: Grow Modestly or Not at All. I could also have entitled it, We're Running Out of People, What Do We Do Now? So why don't we'll move through these slides, and I'll try to do that briskly, and then we can have a conversation. So we'll go ahead and advance. This is sort of the money slide of the deck. This is the Congressional Budget Office's sort of history and forecast of U.S. population. We did in the 2010s come off the slowest percentage increase in U.S. population growth in the country's history. And we are about to transition into a period of even slower growth, and according to CBO, to a point where we won't be growing at all as a country. And so if you look at the various lines here, the one to start paying attention to is that dark blue line at the bottom. That is births minus deaths. That's natural population change in the United States. And you can see around 2032, it's going to go negative, and it's going to stay negative for as long as that forecast goes forward. So then basically, the way to offset that would be through net international immigration. You can see in 2023, 2024, we had a big spike in that. That's well documented during the Biden administration, but that has come abruptly down, and CBO projects it's going to stabilize at about 0.3% going forward. If you accept that assumption, you get the middle line there, that sort of lighter blue line that comes through. That's population growth in the United States, and it is trending from this sort of 0.3% a year gradually to zero by 2055. Now, if you look at some commentators out there right now looking at what's going on with immigration activity, we may have pushed so hard this year that we brought the timeline forward for population decline. This year could end up being a year, the first time in U.S. history, where population has fallen. So keep an eye on that. Those are US data. Let's go to the next slide. So now let's take a look at Oregon. This is percentage change by decade going all the way back to the state's founding. So if you look at the number on there, say 1870, that's telling you what was going on in the decade preceding it, the 1860s. And unsurprising, in the very beginning, when there weren't many people here to begin with, the percentage change is very big. And then you can see the 1910 number at 60%. That's when railroads sort of punched their way into the state and the timber economy took off. The 1950 number is reflecting World War II shipbuilding. Then you get into 1980, that's reflecting the growth in the 70s. That's when Tom McCall famously got up and said, visit but don't stay. That decade, the state grew by 26%. And then we had a strong decade in the 90s and grew by 20%. But then you can see the next couple of decades, we're getting smaller and smaller. And the projection is, as you go out into the 2040s and 2050s, we're probably stabilizing at about 0.5% a year. Or 5% over the course of a decade. We are not highly unlikely to go back to that period where we are growing by 1/4 or 20% in a decade. So let's keep advancing. In an era of relatively slow population growth, we have some predecessors. So this comes out of the state of Michigan, which has been struggling with population for better part of the last 10, 15 years. Governor Whitmer there sort of stepped up and said, hey, we've got to be more appealing. We've got to be more attractive to draw people in and keep our economy vibrant. They created her growth council, created the chart on the left that basically says, look, if you've got more bodies coming in, both in natural growth and net migration, your economy is vibrant, you've got more innovation going on, you've got tax revenue coming in, public investment, community well-being. It's a virtuous cycle. If you go where Michigan has been, and you can look at their per capita income numbers to sort of see what happens when you get out of that cycle, you've got slowing birth rates, which we have, you've got negative net out migration, you end up with labor market challenges, revenue stagnation, and declining community well-being. That is what they would call a cycle of depressed growth. So let's go to the next slide to see what that looks like in news headlines. A cycle of depressed growth is what I would say the city of Portland and Multnomah County are in right now. We've gone through the last several years where obviously you had a big decline in commercial property values downtown, but frankly, the rest of the county and the city aren't growing very quickly. You don't have any cranes out there building multifamily housing unless the handful of publicly supported efforts. So consequently, you've got no new units coming on the tax rolls, building up your property tax base, and you don't have a lot of remodeling going on. So what do we have now? We've got tens of millions of dollars in deficit in the general funds of both the city and the county. It's pitting parks against police and against fire, and folks are struggling. So here's, Portland discloses gaping hole in homeless shelter budget. Portland's top administrator orders hiring freeze due to budget gap. Portland councilors send 75% parks levy to increase to November ballot. As long as this sort of stagnation and slow growth continues, you're going to see more and more of these headlines and sort of an erosion both of public investment and I would argue of community well-being. So now I said, grow modestly or not at all was the outlook. And I would say that 5% per decade number is a bit of an aspiration because I see quite a few headwinds there that I think could depress growth from that modest 0.5% a year, 5% a decade to 0 or into decline. And so let's take a look at what those are on the next slide. 5 pressures driving Oregon towards stagnation. No breaking news here. High housing prices and the resulting homelessness crisis. Home prices have increased by 600% since 1990. And median household incomes have increased by only 300% over that period. And that is, I think, that's sort of the biggest detractor that is making this state unappealing both to households and to businesses is the fact that we have not built housing nearly at the pace as people demanded it over the course of the last 2 decades. And we've created a tight market that has put big upward pressure on prices and on rents. And I would argue that is the principal driver of the homelessness crisis that we have. You're going to get arguments out there that homelessness is driven by behavioral health and substance abuse issues of individuals. But I'm going to argue that you see homelessness at its highest incidence in the states where those personal challenges collide with expensive housing markets. And that's why you have a lot of homelessness up and down the West Coast and between DC and Boston on the East Coast. And you don't have a lot in Arkansas, West Virginia, or Tennessee. Moving on to the next one, K-12 schools among the lowest performing in the, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to work through these 5 and then I'll get into that. K-12 schools among the lowest performing in the United States. Over the course of the last decade, Oregon went from a middle performing state on the National Assessment of Educational Progress in 4th and 8th grade to arguably the lowest performer in 4th grade and among the lowest in 8th grade. To cut to the chase and give you a just my short answer as to why that might be. Federal accountability focused on assessments and standards up until about 2016. That federal accountability framework disappeared around that period, and nothing took its place in Oregon. In other parts of the country, they continue to embrace achievement and measuring achievement and setting goals around achievement. Here we don't, and we've fallen way behind the U.S. average. Number 3, fires and smoke. If you had asked me 18 months ago if I thought climate change and its effects would be a sort of a net population advantage for Oregon or a challenge, I probably would have leaned toward an advantage, thinking that this is a better place than where all the floods and droughts and sea level rise is going to be. But this First Street Foundation has started to put out, this is an organization in Indiana, put out property level impacts of fire and smoke. And you can get them on Zillow now, and you can find individual properties in this state with a 40% chance of being in a wildfire in the next 30 years. So I think we have underestimated how much fires and smoke are going to disrupt economic activity. Over-reliance on the individual income tax, especially in Portland. We have a highly imbalanced tax system. We've known that for a long time. We added a couple local property income taxes through the Supportive Housing Services and Preschool for All in 2020 that has taken our top marginal tax rate in Portland to nearly 14%, second only to New York City. And I think you are starting to see households and businesses react to that. And then finally, and probably the one that might be the toughest to work with or work around is, I would argue, a deeply rooted cultural ambivalence in this state about growth and an aligned policy environment to go with it. So it is no accident that we have highly regulated use of land and that we are 7th in the nation for business regulations. I think that just coincides with it. We built machinery back in the 70s and the 80s to slow and tame growth down. It may have made sense in that period when we grew by a quarter in a decade. But that machine doesn't make sense to leave untouched or unreformed in an era where we're not going to be growing by nearly as much. So those are my 5. And now we'll just sort of move forward to possible policy responses. First, I'm just going to show you where we've been doing this presentation. So you can go ahead and advance the slide. We've been running around sharing this with the governor's office, legislative leadership. We had a webinar. University presidents and foundations. We are going to be running around to Bend, Eugene, Eastern Oregon, Washington County, et cetera. So we'll go to the next slide. What have we been hearing to date? When we did the webinar and asked people for their 5 reasons or a reason for a headwind. This is what came up in the chat, largely aligned. And obviously, this is a self-selected group of people who have been to the Oregon Summit in the past, Leadership Summit in the past, but regulations, housing affordability, educational outcomes, and taxes sort of top the list. You do get wildfires. It's very small there, so I would personally have made that one bigger. But you can see at least those in the business community are sort of seeing what I'm proposing I'm seeing there as well. We go to the next slide. As I've had conversations with legislative leaders and others, we'll sort of click through these. What have I heard? Agreement that Oregon's land use system is outdated and overdue for reform. I think people do have a sense that, we had a big look back in 2009, but really not a lot changed through that, and that we are in a different time, and maybe we have to step back and reevaluate things. We'll come back, go to the next one. Zero defense for regulatory burden and an appetite for a cleanup. Oregon being 7th in the nation on business regulations. I think people do get that things just get added to the administrative rules, added to them, and there's not a lot of maintenance or pruning after those things are added. And so periodically, you just got to go in and take a look. We'll go to the next one. Frustration with the K-12 results, and among a sort of a broad set of folks, I would say a disbelief that pouring more money into the system will fix it. We did have a pretty strong decade of investment in K-12 that got us back to very close to the U.S. average on spending per student, and the achievement went in the other direction. So I think people want to see some reform and more accountability before they see a huge renewed investment in K-12. We'll keep going. A lack of awareness around climate and property level risk forecasts. So you might recall that the legislature debated a wildfire map and then ultimately didn't enact one. I would say it's kind of pointless. All you have to do is go on your phone on Zillow, and you can see wildfire risk and smoke risk for any property that's for sale in the state of Oregon. So I don't know what we were debating there. The insurance markets are going to demand this information, and it's going to be out there regardless of what the legislature does with maps. And then finally, I would say a widespread doubt that politics, as currently practiced, can deliver the reforms. So we go through sort of a recognition of the problem, but then sort of a look at the political environment and unclear direction on how you would work in and around the existing coalitions to make changes big enough to change any of those problems that I've described. So then we'll go to the next slide, and I'm just going to say industry councils that Oregon Business Council have been convening. So we've convened industry councils around the semiconductor work, clean tech work, and food and beverage industries. And they say the same things. We'll just click through these quickly. Land readiness has been an issue. We'll go to the next one. Cost competitiveness, higher operating costs and fragmented incentives, regulatory burdens. Go to the next one. Permitting and predictability. The agencies are slow. The timelines are uncertain. We'll go to the next one. Talent and workforce pipeline. Shortages at all levels, especially in technical and mid-skill roles. Lack of coordinated PK-20 pathways. I'm going to say this one's going to get worse. If we've got shortages now, just wait for the next 10 years. I just went back and looked at age 25 to 44 population in this state. It increased by 100,000 people in the last decade. In the next decade, 25 to 44-year-olds are projected to increase by 11,000 people. So think about that for a minute. We just don't have a lot of people running around. So we'll go to the next slide. Go ahead and go to the, innovation and R&D capacity. We need that as well. Universities in early stage ecosystem under-resourced compared to peer states. So that's an important piece as well. let's go to the next slide. I don't know, for those of you who attended the Leadership Summit a couple of years ago, we invited Derek Thompson. This is Derek Thompson. He is co-author of a new book called Abundance. I co-authored it with Ezra Klein. It was sort of the buzz of the policy community over the course of the summer. This is what he says. He says, right now we have a Democratic Party that is incredibly, historically unpopular and also incredibly ineffective in places that it holds the most power, like New York and California and Oregon. He wasn't quite that blunt when he was here in Oregon 2 years ago, but he's clearly not holding any punches now. His and Ezra's sort of overall critique of what is challenging the Democratic agenda is that for years, the Democrats have focused almost exclusively on subsidizing demand. Really good at getting out Medicaid coverage, at food stamps, at housing vouchers, doing earned income tax credits, you give people cash, give them vouchers, et cetera, to help them buy things in the market. So that's been the central strategy. And they argue that Democrats have got to get better at building things. They've got to get better at the supply side as well. You know, their principal example is the debacle of high-speed rail in California, but they've got many, and they would point to the housing crisis all up and down the West Coast as an example of how Democrats are not very good at building things. So he and Ezra, go ahead to the next slide, made this point that scarcity is a choice. And I think this is almost a bumper sticker for this state. Our crises reflect the overhang of the past into the present. One generation's solutions can become the next generation's problems. And that's where I would argue that we should applaud and be thankful for the legacy of 1970s era reforms. They have created a beautiful place that we all enjoy. But I think at the same time, we have to say that machinery that was created in that era needs to be reformed for a generation ahead of us that is a completely different environment with respect to demographics, with respect to technology, and with respect to climate change. So what could that kind of agenda look like? If we go to the next slide, you can see Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's a big fan of abundance, and he's got the Getting Stuff Done agenda, modernizing PA.gov, reforming permitting and licensing, cutting red tape, and setting standards for good government. So he's all in on abundance. Why don't we go to the next slide? What would it look like if Oregon became a national leader in the practice of abundance? Here's my ideas. That we would have some sort of a growth council that would have the following sort of focus and agenda to it on the next slide. Possible pillars. Let's go through them real quick. Modernize land use. I've clearly signaled that one. Update 1970 rules to deliver 2020 housing, jobs, and clean energy. I would argue that we have 19 goals. In spirit, they're supposed to be equal. In practice, the housing and job goals are not given equal treatment to the forest and farm goals. That needs to be addressed. We do not have a goal 20 associated with climate change. There's one of the goals related to energy that could be repurposed for that, but climate change wasn't discussed back in the 1970s, and so consequently, land priority for transmission or siting of energy facilities is not given equal rate or treatment to farm and forest. We'll go to the next. Modernize regulation to eliminate outdated rules and shift agencies from rule writers to rule managers. Up in British Columbia, they went through, early part of this century, went through a period where they said, look, for every regulation we add, we're gonna take 2 away until we reduce the number of regulations by 20%. It's a budgeting exercise. It just forces agencies to sort of move through and look what they've got on the books and clear out stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore. We'll go to the next one. Scale up forest thinning. and other forest practices. Matt Donegan, former of the HEC and great expert on forest practice, is working with the Oregon Business Council on an ambitious plan to accelerate management practices in this sector. We'll go to the next one. Strengthen K-12 accountability by tying funding and innovation to proven evidence-based gains. The federal government went too far and No Child Left Behind. Not all of that was productive, but the pendulum has swung way too far in the other direction in Oregon. We've got way too many opt-outs for kids taking tests. We just really don't. We are not holding districts or schools accountable for delivering outcomes, and some semblance of that has to come back. The governor passed a package. The implementation of that is going to be key. And finally, I think, we'll have two more here. Fix Portland's income tax. I would argue that it is not sustainable right now for Portland's economy to be sitting at 13.9% at a top marginal tax rate. We can argue it's going to take a couple more years to have enough data to run a regression analysis to prove that the taxes have caused economic harm. I would just say there are certainly red lights blinking there. But I would also say if you talk to any economic developer who's trying to think about what to do in the future of downtown Portland in filling up the 11 million square feet of empty office space, income taxes have got to be fixed before you can even begin to talk about that conversation. And then finally, I would say we could build a business government partnership to address the 5 pressures that I've outlined and to grow Oregon's traded sectors and innovation clusters. So it's something to ride alongside or in partnership with Business Oregon that brings together a lot of work that is already being done by the private sector, but just do it in more close collaboration with state agencies. I've got another slide on here, but we don't need to go through that one. So I'll pause now. This is just the theme for the summit. I'll pause now and take questions if we have time.
Great. Thank you, John. Much appreciated. Questions from commissioners? Either raise your hand so I can see you, or just start speaking. Meg, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I want to understand where this report is coming from. I feel like since it's being presented at a Port Commission meeting, it appears as if it might be Port sponsored or our opinions. And so who's paid for this report and and who's behind it?
I mean, my time under this work was paid for by the Oregon Business Council and in anticipation of the Leadership Summit in December.
Can you say more about who that is, please?
Oregon Business Council is a business roundtable, 45 CEOs in the state, including I think three folks on this call here. So it is a think tank, policy think tank that has been around since the early 1990s and weighs in on pressing public policy issues in Oregon and it advances or proposes economic strategy.
Commissioner Nemi, are you good for now?
My question was answered. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Others?
John, this is Catherine. Catherine Lamb. Thanks, John, for this beautiful, I mean, not beautiful, very detailed. It's hard to see and read these reports. And I so appreciate your last point on the recommendation is to build business government partnership. I think the partnerships can be really advancing even more so than now, because I think when we have policy at one table and then business at one table, sometimes it's disconnect the goal, the results. And so I so appreciate the last point on your 6 points of the recommendation is to build business government partnerships. So if you can really really advance that priorities, because I think once we have a dialogue, then we can really get to work for the same results. The other things that I like to also want to add in, this is my perspective of, I think right now we have a lot of work already in the work. I really think if we can take time, step back to assess what is not functioning, that we can eliminate, and how to be more effective before we can't hold agencies or systems accountable. I mean, we need to, no questions, invest in some of the systems that's dated. It takes some time, but I think the efficiencies is where there's a big opportunities. That's from my perspective. That's, outsider looking in, right? So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. But thanks, John.
Yeah, back to your partnership point. I don't want to say that there isn't great public-private partnership already going on. There is. You had an awful lot of good collaboration between the governor's office and the business community on the Central City Task Force. We've had it through the semiconductor work. Oregon put together one of the most coherent, according to our former Commerce Secretary, most coherent chips plans in the country. So there's lots of good work. I think there's just a way to sort of formalize it and make it more routine than it has been in the past. And then with respect to your efficiency, I think there's just an awful lot of work to do on execution. Oregon is pretty good at producing policy. I think we've got an awful lot of good policy and even decent rulemaking on housing, for example. The houses still aren't getting built, and so you've just got to keep asking the question: what is it going to take in implementation to get that housing out of the ground?
Well, I just want to add one. I mean, I just want to get back to your response based on Commissioner Nimi. My questions about my inputs about the partnerships, business and government, more of a smaller business scales. So that's where I see there's an opportunity there. But thanks for your response.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamb. Commissioner Johnson, and then Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, John. Thanks. It's always fantastic to see this presentation. I've seen it a couple of times, and I think our last interaction I didn't have a chance to get to you. But when you think about population decline, there's a train of thought when you think more broadly about where we are as a population globally, not just in Oregon, as to whether or not we can continue to support population, as it stands, and population growth with the limited number of resources that, we have. So does your data kind of encompass and normalize the fact that we know we have shrinking global resources as it relates to population growth and being able to support that? And is population decline really a negative thing as it relates to the resources we know we'll need to support a population for the next 50, next century, 100 years or so?
Yeah. So there certainly is an argument out there for degrowth, and that strategy, I think, is as strong here in Oregon as it is any place. I think some folks look at what's going on here in Oregon and in Portland in particular, saying, well, good. So we don't have to build, may not have to build quite as much housing, and we can sort of just either flatline or slightly decline over time, and that might be a positive outcome. I would say counter to that, if I'm sitting here in Oregon, every new person and new idea that comes to this state is a lottery ticket for innovation. And if you stop growing, you will have stagnation. You can go look at Michigan's experience over the course of the last 15 years, and their average incomes and median incomes relative to ours. They are drifting into a difficult space, which is why Whitmer has convened the group that she did. I would sort of stepping through the case for growth. And again, it's not going to overwhelm us like it did in the 70s. I think 0.5% a year, it creates construction jobs. It keeps our schools relatively attended. So you're not closing schools and laying off teachers. So, and the like. And then we have all kinds of legacy fixed costs that we are going to have to pay regardless of whether we grow or we don't. So the PERS liability is what, $25 billion. We can either pay that with the people we have here now, or maybe even a fewer of us, or we can invite a few more people to help us pay the PERS liability. We're going to replace the interstate bridge. We can either do that by ourselves, or we can have a slightly larger population, the Burnside Bridge, you name it. It's those fixed costs are going to be borne either by the same population or a slightly bigger one. And I would argue the latter is a better way to go. And then finally, I would say we've got an elder care crisis coming. 5 years from now, the front end of the baby boomers turn 85. You're going to see a kink in the curve on long-term care. And all you have to do is go to Japan or Maine or Hong Kong to see what it looks like when your workforce can't keep up at all with the aging of the population. It's not a good outcome.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that, John. Appreciate that clarity.
Commissioner Adams.
Hi, John. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for your time. I have a few questions for you. I'm dialing in from North Africa, so I'm going to leave my camera.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
My first question is, of the 5 or 6 recommendations that you made, there must be an order of operations that you are thinking, which of those are the most urgent, and you think should go first. So that's my first question, John.
Yeah.
And then so that's the softball question.
Okay, I'll answer that one so I can keep these all in my head.
Okay.
Quickly, I do think it is time to have the conversation, sort of the abundance conversation about the machinery of the 70s. And that is not going to be something that's going to be addressed in 2026 or even 2027. I feel like this is at a minimum a 2-session effort. 2-long session effort, and it really is to open up a conversation with Oregon about its ambivalence around growth, try to change the narrative to some extent, reduce the fear of people sort of overrunning us, and begin to sort of tweak that machinery that we built 50 years ago and haven't really changed in any important way since.
Yeah, I love that, John. I agree. And I think the growth presents opportunity for lots of different populations to move and for economic mobility. And so that's also a component of it. So here's the hard question.
Uh-oh.
One of the items in one of the word cloud slide was wrong leadership. And so what do you think these 5 or 6 recommendations you've made, what do you think that means for the kinds of leaders we need to be looking for going forward statewide?
Yeah, I think you're going to, and this is where the Abundance Book Group is really that is the book. And I think it's leaders who understand and have a vision, can look beyond 2-year cycles. They're adaptive leaders because the change coming at us, Rakaya, is so different than anything that we've experienced in the last 50 years. I mean, it's always easy to say, oh, the future is different than the past, but it really is this time. If you think across the domains of climate and demography with the 85-year-olds and lower fertility rates, and then I haven't even said much about AI and how much that's going to disrupt labor markets. So I think you're going to have an adaptive leader, someone who can think out 25 years, and someone who is going to be willing to break or disrupt old political coalitions, because we have political coalitions that have built up in this state that are very strong and support the status quo, and those coalitions have to be disrupted.
Thank you, John.
Commissioner Sampat.
Yes. Thank you, John. This was very informative. I think getting back to economic prosperity and shared economic prosperity, that is, part of our mission here at Port, I think resonates with everybody around this room. And in a way, as I was seeing those charts, I was seeing myself in those. You had that big bump in 1980s. Well, that's when I first moved, and I was part of that big bump. I got to see Intel grow from $1 billion company to a $35 billion company when I left it in 2009. I also got a chance to start 2 companies of my own, one of which is still a going concern. And I've had the opportunity also to start a department and a program at Portland State, which is the fastest growing grad program at Portland State, period. So I think we used to be able to do big things. That's what it felt like when I first moved. And I think the question I think around the table is, what is it that we can do to kind of catalyze that once again in the state? So this is more of a comment, but this is very timely, and thanks for kind of stirring the pot.
Okay, a couple reactions to that. First of all, you violated Tom McCall's visit but don't stay request precisely there in the 1980s. And I would say that we're all thankful that you did, because Oregon's a better place for your having moved here. Joe Courtwright, who's been a mentor of mine, a long time economic observer in Oregon, has said, every person who moves here is a lottery ticket, and to innovation and to talent and contribution to the state. You clearly were one of those lottery tickets, and that's, I think, my strongest argument as to why we need to continue to be an inclusive place that is appealing and supportive of more people to move here.
Thank you. Commissioner Strader.
Well, thank you, John. That's a great report. There's a ton of information there. I know we have a lot of different things that we're struggling with in the area, whether it's housing, the lack of housing, lack of access to housing, obviously jobs. We still have an awful lot of people that the whole job market is changing with AI coming up potentially, but I don't think really anybody has seriously addressed what may happen quickly in the next several years. Obviously, houselessness that we have out there. What causes that? There's a multitude of factors that causes it. It's good jobs. It is mental health. It is, the cost of living. There's our healthcare system. All these things add into that, as well as education, climate. These are huge systemic changes. My question to you is, how can we look at things in a different, understanding we have a complete paradigm shift, instead of trying to take out the duct tape and the baling wire to make a system this dysfunctional work, how to look at this from a different paradigm, knowing the one thing we have for certain is a substantial change coming in a very short amount of time. We need a more cohesive industrial policy. We need to do updates to the way that we address housing, whether it's in a rural setting or whether it's in a city setting. How can we make it affordable? These are big issues that we need to look at differently. And it can't just be politicians and business, although that's very important. We also have to invoke the citizens themselves to be able to get involved in this process. What do you recommend? Because we have some huge things that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah. So just a couple thoughts there. First of all, I do think this state treasures local control. There's a note, sort of a sense of social libertarianism that feeds that the neighborhood knows best. And I think that is fine, but we do have to come around some higher level goals and priorities and allow localities their liberty to move forward. But if they're not contributing to those goals, there needs to be accountability and consequences. I think that's essentially the process that we're in the middle of with housing. We have said that the cities have had and neighborhoods have had too much control for too long, and they've been able to shut things down and veto building. And now the state is taking a more active role in that process and building up some production goals and an accountability system. To go with it, I'd say you got the same issue with the schools. Yes, teachers know best and an individual school knows best, et cetera. But we have got to hold districts, schools, principals, educators, parents accountable for those outcomes in a way that we have been shy to do in the past. So I think that's a piece of it. The other little bit of advice that comes out of abundance is we have got to get better at building things generally. And if things aren't being built, we need to constantly go back and say, what is the next thing that is getting in the way? We passed an awful lot of good policy on housing, but there's still stuff in the way here. I'm not going to go in the list of what it is, but we've got to revisit that question if stuff's not getting out of the ground.
So one of the things that I'm kind of concerned with is sometimes when we take a top-down attitude on this, coming out, whether it's from state politics or such, people have to have that input. We just have to find a way to make it manageable. Nobody wants change in their area in most cases. They're resistant to it, but they're going to be very resistant if they don't have participation in the process. How can that be done where we apply first principles and get people to lean in knowing these are the issues, and having a direct conversation where first we know what the problems are and get people to participate so we come up with good solutions. Ignoring it or not wanting change is not going to put us in a good place.
I do think it starts with a deep conversation about values and then goals, commonly agreed goals to go with them. One thing that is just so painfully obvious here in Portland is that you don't have agreement around goal setting on homeless intervention policy. I would say there's at least 5 different entities and political actors that have different ideas of how they want to challenge, how they want to address this issue. Within the boundaries of Multnomah County, we spent $500 million last year on targeted homeless interventions. And the public, to this point, would argue they've seen very little change with respect to outcomes. And I would say that starts with a lack of agreement on what we're trying to get done.
Thank you.
Chair Koba, it's Mike Devon.
Yes, Commissioner Devon, you are next.
Good. I'm here at headquarters. I forgot the memo, so.
I see you.
John, thank you very much. My name is Mike Devon, and I'm an economist also, at least as an undergraduate major. And so thank you for this version of your presentation. I'm also a relative newcomer to Oregon. I've been here since the summer of 2021. And speaking of climate change, that was the summer. It was 115 degrees. I was moving in that. So down with that. I'll go to 2 things. One, a couple things that you highlighted in your slides. And then 2, echoing, I guess, my fellow commissioners, Rikaya, who talked about order of operations, and then Commissioner Schrader, who talked about involving the citizens. My observation is this, and again, you pointed this out in your slide, right? We're setting up this straw fight, right? Parks versus police, houselessness versus job growth. And to me, one of the things we do that we have to turn this into not an either or, but an and. And my question is, or I'd love to hear your opinion about how do we do that? Because that, again, I've only been here for 4 years, but that seems to be a sticking point. You talked about flashing red lights. If you're an individual in this city, in this state, the flashing red lights is all about houselessness. But if you're a business, the flashing red lights are all about lack of job growth and the stagnation that you talked about. So again, any thoughts you have about how we resolve those tensions?
Yeah, I do think it sort of goes back to Governor Whitmer's. She's 15 years ahead of us in this problem, and changing the narrative around growth. Because it is only through, again, some modest, deliberate growth that I think you can have all the things that you want to have. And that is just not where this community is right now. I think this community's head is still in the 70s or the 90s, where we did have a period where I went and testified, and Washington County and Hillsborough did not want Intel to grow in 1999 because they had grown so much during that decade that they didn't know how to plan or execute the infrastructure. We have to change the narrative around growth and persuade people that it is an input to a more inclusive, more dynamic, more innovative, better served, larger public sector with better services. I think that's the hard work of where it begins. It's not easy because I think growth ambivalence is in our DNA, but I think that's where the work starts.
Right. I don't see any other hands up. Just want to make sure no one else has a comment. John, thank you. I don't know if you are still tweaking your slide deck or if you're pretty much good to go for the business summit. The only thought I would share is it was very helpful to me when you used a couple of examples of recent activities in terms of partnership with state agencies, business community, the various interest groups, and perhaps adding those as examples of ways to start, and then how can we build on that might be helpful for an audience. Just my 2 cents. I would agree that being a lifelong Oregonian from Eastern Oregon, we have a very interesting thought process around growth in this state. There's no doubt about it. And I struggle with this because I do believe what I have seen in Oregon's history is we focus on economic opportunity when we're in a crisis. And then when things are going well, we completely put that aside and we're focused on everything else. It would be nice to have kind of an underlying basic thought process around economic opportunity all the time. I don't know how to get there. But one way may be thinking about how we talk about it, because there is such polarization around land use. There's such polarization around that term growth. There's such polarization around NIMBYism. Yes, put it in Oregon, but not in my backyard. Is there a way that we can talk about it, think about it differently so that we can build, some common groups around how we can move forward? And I don't have the answer anymore. I spent 37 and a half years of my life in state government working on these issues. And I do think it's time to turn that over to someone else. So just kind of a few lingering twitches from all of those times.
Well, we will edit this right up until December 8th, and I'm going to take your comments and continue to improve it.
Great, thank you. We really appreciate you coming to the commission. We love having this kind of time for us to share and to to throw out great ideas and hope that some of them at least go somewhere. So thank you again. Thanks for coming and good luck.
And thank you, and for all the great work you're doing for the port.
Great.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, John.
All right. We'll go to our agenda items now. We have one consent item, and I want to check to see if any commissioner wants a presentation of the consent item. Seeing none, the consent item is readoption of commission policy number 6.1.2-investments. Can I get a motion and a second for approval of the item?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Pam, can you call the roll?
Commissioners Adams,
Aye.
Koba,
Aye.
Devon,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. We have one action item, and I'd like Dan Pippinger to introduce the action item.
Hey, good morning, commissioners. Great to see you all. Commissioner Devon, if I had recognized you were down in the commission room, I would have come and sat with you. I'm sorry I didn't. Commissioners, this agenda item is to request approval by you to execute a reimbursement agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration regarding the installation of runway navigation aids on the north runway at PDX. As you know, as we're kind of entering the end of the T-Core phase, we're turning our attention back to the airfield now. We have a big airfield project coming up in 2027, which is a rehabilitation of the north runway. In conjunction with that, we're working with the FAA to install low visibility navigation aids on that runway, similar to the set we have on the south runway, which will greatly improve the flexibility and resilience of PDX and is really an enabling project for the goal of the future of the seismically resilient south runway to give us that capability on the north side. So here to talk a little more about this and provide some context in the navigation aids and the runway work, and to present the reimbursement agreement for your approval is Steve Nagy, our Director of Airport Operations, and Chris Edwards, Engineering Project Manager.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Dan, for the introduction. And good morning, Commissioners. This agenda item requests approval to execute the reimbursable agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration for the North Runway navigation aids for Category 3 approaches, upgrades as part of the North Runway Rehabilitation Project here at PDX in the amount of $6,484,331.20. As Dan said, next slide, please. As Dan said, for familiarization, we have our two parallel runways here at PDX. You can see their designations. Colloquially, we refer to them as the North Runway and the South Runway. The South Runway is our runway that has our greatest capabilities right now for landing aircraft in low visibility weather conditions. The North Runway, and that is what's called an ILS or Instrument Landing System Category 3. North Runway does not have that. It has ILS Category 1. That means it's significantly higher. The visibility and the ceilings have to be significantly higher for an aircraft to be able to see the runway and land. This reimbursable agreement and work with the FAA that would be done in conjunction with the rehabilitation of the North Runway would be done in the summer of 27, would bring that category of instrument landing system up to the same category that we have on the South Runway. That would increase, as Dan said, our overall resiliency, being able to land aircraft in bad weather on either runway in either conditions. And And it also prepares us, as Dan said, for the upcoming work that we would do at some point on the south runway when we have to close it for an extended period over a year to do the seismically resilient runway. These navigation aids are owned by the FAA, owned and maintained by the FAA. So as part of the work that we would be doing to overhaul, upgrade and overhaul the north runway when we reconstruct it in part of the summer of 27 project, we would look to the FAA, and this agreement would put in place their ability to fund and do the work necessary to upgrade the enhance those instrument landing systems on the north runway. Next slide. Kind of just says the things that I said there. Right now, the south runway is our only low visibility runway. And this upgrade to the north runway, by doing it simultaneous with the work that we are doing in the summer of 27, would improve our overall efficiency and resiliency, being able to allow aircraft to operate in any weather conditions to either one of our runways. Next slide. With that, I'll turn this over to Chris Edwards, the engineering project manager for this, to let her go over the technical details of what this actually involves.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve, very much. So before you today, here's the project work that the FAA would be doing. So we would be replacing that approach lighting system, new threshold bar, our touchdown zone lighting. Those are some of the key features. And again, that would be part of the work that is done as part of the 2027 North Runway Rehabilitation Project. Next slide. Some of the key components of the FAA's work scope is that the design, the procurement, and construction. And just to reiterate, the FAA does own, operate, and maintain all of our FAA nav aids out there. So any work on them requires us to reimburse them. This is a standard funding approach at all other airports for when we have to do work on those FAA-owned nav aids. So to that, they will procure and install our approach lighting system with sequential flashing lights, the LSAF-2, along with its shelter. Key component to that is a long lead time. It takes about 18 months to get that. That's why we are doing this reimbursable in advance right now. We're also going to be relocating that glide slope, our touchdown zone lighting, precision approach path indicator, doing some fiber optic transmission system upgrades, as well as the far field monitor. And next slide, please. Here's that overall schedule. Again, the item bolded before you is before you today. Again, that design and procurement, the 18-month period is shown there. We will be coming back with a future construction contract in later 2026 for the ultimate construction of the runway rehabilitation and the nav aid installation in 2027. Next slide, please. Here is our budget and funding. Again, that reimbursable before you today. We've done a previous reimbursable agreement for some initial ILS, or the instrument landing system upgrades. That was done under the executive director's delegated authority. This will be funded out of our airline cost center. Next slide, please. The staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Chris and Steve. Commissioners, any questions? Not seeing any. So can I get a motion and a second for approval of the executive director's recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Pam, can you call the roll?
Yes, Commissioners Adams,
Aye.
Koba,
Aye.
Devon,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Nimi,
Aye.
Samput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. So let's do just a quick check here, time check. We have a required public meetings training that is happening next, which, as I understand it, we leave this Teams link meeting and go to that Teams link that was sent to us. Dan Blofeld, can you give us a sense of, I bet you some of us would like to get up and stretch our legs if we could. What time do you want to start? Do you want to aim for 11:05? We may have lost Dan. Does anybody want to answer that question?
Sorry, I was on still 4 years later. That sounds great if it's enough time for folks to stretch.
Okay, let's aim for 11:05. Everybody, get up and do some jumping jacks, and we'll see you in a minute. This meeting of the commission is adjourned. Thank you.